Hello, everyone. Got a few dirty jokes for you today.
So one night, a blonde nun was praying in her room when God appeared before her. "My daughter, you have pleased me greatly. Your heart is full of love for your fellow creatures, and your actions and prayers are always for the benefit of others. I have come to you, not only to thank and commend you, but to grant you anything you wish," said God. "Dear Heavenly Father, I am perfectly happy and am doing what I love. I lack for nothing. I feel content in all ways," said the nun. "There must be something you would have of me," said God. "Well, there is one thing," she said. "Just name it," said God. "It's those blonde jokes. They are so demeaning to blondes everywhere, not just to me. I would like for blonde jokes to stop." "Consider it done," said God. "Blonde jokes shall be stricken from the minds of humans everywhere. But surely there is something that I could do just for you." "There is one thing, but it's really small and not worth your time," said the nun. "Name it, please," said God. "It's the M&Ms, said the nun. "They're so hard to peel." So, a beautiful blonde goes out with a bodybuilder. Things go well, and by their fourth date, she wants to take it to the next level. They reach her apartment, and, after a nice dinner, begin to kiss and take their clothes off. The blonde says, "Wow, what a great chest you have," he says. 100 pounds of dynamite, baby." He takes off his pants, and the blonde says, "What massive calves you have." He replies, "That's 100 pounds of dynamite, baby." He then removes his underwear, and the blonde runs off screaming in fear. He rushes to put his clothes back on and chases after her. He finally catches up with her. "Why did you run away?" he pants. She says, "With all that dynamite, I ran when I saw how short the fuse was." So a blonde lived with two blonde roommates. She bought a new car, and on the way home from the dealer got caught in a terrible hailstorm. Her brand new car was dented all over. When she got home, she called the service department to ask what she should do. They offer to send the car to a mechanic, but she'd have to pay for it. She tells them she has absolutely no money. Couldn't they just send someone anyway? The service chief, being a prankster, told her to wait till the car was cool and then blow hard on the tailpipe, which would pop out all the dents. A half hour later, her roomies saw her on her knees behind the car, blowing as hard as she could. They asked what the heck she was doing, and she told them she was trying to blow the dents out, but it's not working. "You dummy," one of her blonde roommates said. "You have to roll up the windows first." So two blondes were exiting a restaurant when they discovered, to their horror, that they locked their keys in their car. The one blonde says to the other, "What do we do? Do we get a coat hanger and pick the lock?" The other one replied, "No, people will think we're trying to break in." The other one said, "Well, do we get a knife and cut the rubber and pop the lock?" The other one answered, "No, people will think we're too stupid to use the coat hanger." The other one said, "Well, we better think of something quick because it's starting to rain and the sunroof is open." So a blonde was taking helicopter lessons. The instructor said, "I'll radio you every 1,000 feet to see how you're doing." At 1,000 feet, the instructor radioed her and said she was doing great. At 2,000 feet, he said she was still doing well. Right before she got to 3,000 feet, the propeller stopped and she twirled to the ground. The instructor ran to where she crash-landed and pulled her out of the helicopter. "What went wrong?" the instructor asked. the blonde said. At 2,500 feet, I started to get cold, so I turned the big fan off. So this blonde was walking down a road carrying a bag when a guy came along. The guy asks, "What are you carrying?" "Melons," the blonde replies. "Cool." The guy says, "If I can guess how many there are, can I have one of them?" The blonde giggles and says, "If you can guess how many there are, you can have both of them." So a blonde stormed up to the front desk of the library and, screaming, said, "I have a complaint." "How can I help you?" said the librarian, looking up at her. "I borrowed a book last week and it was horrible." Puzzled by her complaint, the librarian asked what was wrong with it. "It had way too many characters and there was no plot," said the blonde. "Ah," nodded the librarian. "So you're the person who took our phone book." So an Alabama pastor said to his congregation, "Someone in this congregation has spread a rumor that I belong to the KKK. This is a horrible lie. I am embarrassed and do not intend to accept this. Now, I want the party who said this to stand and ask forgiveness from God." No one moved. The preacher continued, "Do you have the nerve to face me and admit this is a falsehood? Remember, you will be forgiven, and in your heart you will feel glory. Now, stand and confess your transgression." Again, all were quiet. Then, slowly, a young blonde woman stood up with her head bowed as she spoke. "Reverend, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. I never said you were a member of the Ku Klux Klan. I simply told a couple of my friends that you were a wizard under the sheets." So, two blondes decided to go on a hunting trip to see what it's all about. After a few days camping, they finally bagged a deer and were dragging it by the rear legs back to the truck. But the antlers kept getting stuck in the mud. One says to the other, "This is tough, but we only got about a mile left to reach the truck." Another hunter happened upon them then, saw their dilemma, and told them, "If you drag the deer the other way, the antlers won't stick in the mud." So the blondes give it try, and it worked. The first blonde says that hunter was right. "This way is a lot easier." The second blonde says, "Sure was, but now we're 2 miles from the truck." So 3 blondes are in front of the heavenly gate. Each of the blondes lives a sinful and depraved life of lust and drugs. Yet, after their deaths, they find themselves before St. Peter. Peter looks at these 3 girls and shakes his head. Then, after a moment, he speaks. "Okay, ladies, the Lord has decided to be merciful and give you another chance. I'm going to ask each of you the same question. If you get the question right, God will let you into heaven. If you get it wrong, it is hell where you will be going." Peter then reminds the girls, "You will each be asked the same question. So, if the first girl gets it right, the other 2 will get it as well. So choose carefully as to who will answer the question first." The girls whisper amongst themselves, and the first blonde steps up, "I will answer first." Peter eyes her over and asks, "What is Easter?" The first blonde thinks about it and answers, "It where everyone decorates their trees and gives each other presents." Saddened, Peter informs her, "I am sorry, but you are wrong." Suddenly, a big, fiery pit opens up below her and swallows her up. The second blonde steps up. Peter asks the same question, "What is Easter?" The second blonde smiles and proudly announces, "That is the day when everyone dresses in green, and if you do not, everyone pinches you." Peter looks at her, saddened. I'm sorry. The pit opens up and then swallows the second blonde. The third blonde steps up and smiles widely as Peter asks, "What is Easter?" The blonde proudly announces, "That is the day when Jesus was betrayed to the Romans and crucified by Pontius Pilate. When they took him off the cross, they placed him in a large tomb and sealed it shut with a large stone." Peter was surprised. "That is very close. What you described is Good Friday. What comes next?" The blonde continues, "Well, the next day they move the rock away, and when Jesus comes out, if he sees his shadow, there are 6 more weeks of winter." So one day, while on patrol, a police officer pulled over a car for speeding. He went up to the car and asked the driver to roll down her window. The first thing he noticed, besides the nice red sports car, was how hot the driver was. Blue eyes, blonde, the works. "I've pulled you over for speeding, miss. Could I see your driver's license?" "What's a license?" replied the blonde, instantly giving away the fact that she was as dumb as a stump. "It's usually in your wallet," replied the officer. After fumbling for a few minutes, the driver managed to find it. "Now, may I see your registration?" asked the cop. "Registration? What's that?" asked the blonde. "It's usually in your glove compartment," said the cop impatiently. After some more fumbling, she found the registration. "I'll be back in a minute," said the cop and walked back to his car. The officer called into the dispatch to run a check on the woman's license and registration. After a few moments, the dispatcher came back. Is this woman driving a red sports car?" "Yes," replied the officer. "Is she a drop-dead gorgeous blonde?" asked the dispatcher. Yes," replied the cop. "Here's what you do," said the dispatcher. "Give her the stuff back and drop your pants." "What? I can't do that. It's inappropriate," exclaimed the cop. "Trust me. Just do it," said the dispatcher, a smile in his voice. So the cop goes back to the car, gives back the license and registration, and drops his pants just as the dispatcher said. The blonde looks down and sighs. "Oh no, not another breathalyzer." So a blonde woman was sick and tired of all the unfair jokes about blondes. One evening, she went home and memorized all the state capitals. Back in the office the next day, some guy started telling a dumb blonde joke. She interrupted him with a shrill announcement. "I've had it up to here with these blonde jokes. I want you to know that this blonde went home last night and did something probably none of you could do. I memorized all of the state capitals." One of the guys, of course, said, "I don't believe you. What is the capital of Texas?" "T," she answered. So an airline captain was helping a new blonde flight attendant prepare for his first overnight trip. Upon their arrival, the captain showed the flight attendant the best place for airline personnel to eat, shop, and stay overnight. The next morning, as the pilot was preparing the crew for the day's route, he noticed the new attendant was missing. He knew which room she was in at the hotel, and so he called her up, wondering what happened to her. She answered the phone in distress and said she couldn't get out of her room. "You can't get out of your room?" the captain asked. "Why not?" "There are only 3 doors in here," the blonde groaned. "One leads to the bathroom, one leads to the closet, and one has a sign on it that says, 'Do not disturb.'" So a blonde decides one day that she is sick and tired of all these blonde jokes and how all blondes are perceived as stupid. So she decides to show her husband that fact. While her husband is off at work, she decides that she is going to paint a couple of rooms in the house. The next day, Right after her husband leaves for work, she gets down to the task at hand. Her husband arrives home at 5:30 and smells the distinctive smell of paint. He walks into the living room and finds his wife lying on the floor in a pool of sweat. He notices that she is wearing a ski jacket and a fur coat at the same time. He goes over and asks her if she is okay. "I'm great," she replies. "What are you doing?" "I wanted to prove to you that not all blonde women are stupid. So I painted the house." "That's wonderful, honey." "Thank you." He beams. "Just one question, though. Why are you wearing your ski jacket over your fur coat?" "Well, I wanted to be thorough, and the directions on the paint can say, for best results, put on 2 coats." So a blind man enters a bar, carefully, and finds his way to a bar stool. After ordering a drink and sitting there for a while, the blind guy yells to the bartender, "Hey, you want to hear a blonde joke?" The bar immediately becomes very, very quiet. In a husky, deep voice, the woman next to him says, "Before you tell that joke, you should know something. The bartender is blonde, the bouncer is blonde, and I'm a 6-foot-tall, 200-pound blonde with a black belt in karate. What's more, the fella sitting next to me is blonde, and he's a weightlifter. The woman to your right is a blonde, and she's a pro wrestler. Think about it seriously, mister. You still want to tell that blonde joke?" "Nah," says the blind guy. "Not if I'm gonna have to explain it 5 times. So, an Italian guy is out picking up women in Rome. While at his favorite bar, he manages to attract one rather attractive-looking blonde. So they're back at his place, and sure enough, they go at it. After they are done, the Italian sits back pleased. Then he rolls over, lights up a cigarette and asks her, "So you finish?" After a slight pause, she replies, "No." Surprised, but pleasantly, he puts out his cigarette, rolls back on top of her, and has his way with her again, this time lasting even longer than the first. Again he rolls over, lights a cigarette, and asks, "So, you finish?" And again, after a short pause, she simply says, "No." Stunned, but still acting reflexively on his macho pride, he once again puts out the cigarette and mounts his companion du jour. This time, with all the strength he could muster up, he barely manages to end the task, but he does after quite some time and energy is spent. Barely able to roll over, he reaches for his cigarette, lights it again, and then asks tiredly, "So, please, you finish?" "No, no, I'm Swedish," says the blonde. So a blonde walked into an electronics store and said to the salesman, "I want that TV." The salesperson shook his head and said, "No, we don't sell to blondes." So the blonde left and came back with her hair dyed brown and said, "I'll take that TV." Again, the salesman said, "No, we don't sell to blondes." So she left again and came back with a hat, a fake nose, and with her hair dyed black and said, "I want that TV." But the salesman still said, "Sorry, we don't sell to blondes." Finally, the blonde got fed up and said, "That's it." "How do you keep guessing I'm a blonde?" she asked. The salesman sighed and said, "Because that's a microwave." So 2 bowling teams, one of all blondes and one of all brunettes, charter a double-decker bus for a weekend bowling tournament in London. The brunette team rides in the bottom of the bus. The blonde team rides on the top level. The brunette team down below is living it up, having a great time, when one of them realizes she doesn't hear anything from the blondes upstairs. She decides to go up and investigate. When the brunette reaches the top, she finds all the blondes frozen in fear, staring straight ahead at the road and clutching the seats in front of them with white knuckles. She says, "What the heck's going on up here?" "We're having a grand time downstairs." One of the blondes looks up and says, "Yeah, but you've got a driver." So, a beautiful young model boarded a plane to New York with a ticket for the economy section. She looked at the seats in economy and then looked into the forward cabin at the luxurious first-class seats. Seeing that the first-class seats appeared to be much larger and more comfortable, she moved forward to the last empty seat in first class. The flight attendant checked her ticket and told the woman that her seat was in economy. The blonde replied, "I'm a famous model, and I've never had this problem before. I'm going to sit here all the way until we get to New York." Flustered, the flight attendant went to the cockpit and informed the captain of the problem. The captain went back and told the woman that her assigned seat was in economy. Again, the blonde replied, "I'm a famous model. I'm sitting here all the way to New York." The captain didn't want to cause a commotion, and so returned to the cockpit to discuss the blonde problem with the co-pilot. The co-pilot said that he used to date a model like her and that he could take care of the problem. He then went back and briefly whispered something in the blonde's ear. She immediately got up and said, "Okay, thank you." She then hugged the co-pilot and rushed back to her seat in the economy section. The pilot and flight attendant, who were watching with rapt attention, asked the co-pilot what he had said to the woman. He replied, "I just told her that the first-class seats aren't going to New York." So, a young blonde woman goes to an office for a job interview. The interviewer decides to start with the basics. "So, miss, can you tell us your age, please?" he asks. The blonde counts carefully on her fingers for about 3 seconds before replying a 25. The interviewer tries another straightforward one to break the ice. "And can you tell us your height, please?" The young lady stands up and produces a measuring tape from her handbag. She then traps one end under her foot and extends the tape to the top of her head. She checks the measurement and announces 5'3". This isn't looking good, so the interviewer goes for the real basics. "And, just to confirm for our records, your name, please?" The blonde bobs her head from side to side for about 20 seconds, mouthing something silently to herself, before replying Stephanie. The interviewer is completely baffled at this stage, so he asks, "Just out of curiosity, miss, we can understand you're counting on your fingers to work out your age, and the measuring tape for your height is obvious. But what were you doing when we asked you your name?" "Oh, that," replies the blonde. "That's just me running through 'Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you.'" So, a blonde driving a car became lost in a snowstorm. She didn't panic, however, because she remembered what her dad had once told her. If you ever get stuck in a snowstorm, just wait for a snowplow to come by and follow it. Sure enough, pretty soon a snowplow came by, and she started to follow it. She followed the plow for about 45 minutes. Finally, the driver of the truck got out and asked her what she was doing. She explained that her dad had told her if she ever got stuck in a snowstorm to follow a plow. The driver nodded and said, "Well, I'm done with the Walmart parking lot. Do you want to follow me over to Best Buy now?" So a blonde woman came in for a routine physical at the doctor's office. "There you go," said the nurse as she handed her a urine cup. "The bathroom is over there on your left. The doctor will see you in a few minutes." A few minutes later, the lady came out of the bathroom. She hands an empty container back to the nurse. With a relieved look on her face, she says, "Thank you. But they had a toilet in there, so I didn't need this after all." So the blonde wife came home from her first day commuting into the city. Her husband noticed she was looking a little peaked and asked, "Honey, are you feeling all right?" "Not really," she replied. "I'm nauseated from sitting backward on the train." "Poor dear," he said. "Why didn't you ask the person sitting across from you to switch seats for a while?" "I couldn't," she replied. "There was no one there." So, a blonde man is hired to paint the lines on the road. On the first day, he paints 10 miles, and his employers are amazed. But the second day, he painted just 5, and on the third day, he painted only a mile of the road. Disappointed, his boss asks what the problem was. The blonde replies, "Well, sir, every day I have to walk farther and farther to get back to the paint bucket." So the local sheriff was looking for a deputy. So Chad, the new blonde recruit, wants the job. "Okay," the sheriff drawled. "Chad, what is 1 and 1? 11, he replied. The sheriff thought to himself, "That's not what I meant, but he's right. What 2 days of the week start with the letter T? Today and tomorrow." He was again surprised that Chad supplied a correct answer that he had never thought of himself. Perhaps he has a creative mind. "Now, Chad, listen carefully. Who killed Abraham Lincoln?" Chad looked a little surprised himself, then thought really hard for a minute, and finally admitted, "I don't know." "Well, why don't you go home and work on that one for a while?" So, Chad wandered over to the pool hall, where his pals were waiting to hear the results of the interview. "Hey, Chad, how was it?" "It went great. First day on the job, and I'm already working on a murder case." So a blonde was speeding in a 35-mile-per-hour zone when a local police officer pulled her over and walked up to the car. The officer also happened to be a blonde, and she asked for the blonde's driver's license. The driver searched frantically in her purse for a while and finally said to the blonde policewoman, "What does a driver's license look like?" Irritated, the blonde cop said, "You dummy, it's got your photo on it." The blonde driver frantically searched her purse again and found a small rectangular mirror down at the bottom. She held it up to her face and said, "Aha, this must be my driver's license," and handed it to the blonde policewoman. The blonde cop looked in the mirror, handed it back to the driver and said, "You're free to go. Also, if I had known you were a police officer too, we could have avoided all of this." So I went to see a movie the other night. I sat in an aisle seat as I usually do because it feels a little roomier. Just as the feature was about to start, a blonde from the center of the row got up and started working her way out. "Excuse me, sorry, oops, excuse me, pardon me, gotta hurry, oops, excuse me." By the time she got to me, I was trying to look around her and I was a little impatient. So I said, "Couldn't you have done this a little earlier?" "No," she said in a loud whisper. "Turn off your phone message just flashed up on the screen and mine is in the car." So, 2 blondes are working at a warehouse. One blonde, tired of working, says to the other, "Watch this. I'm going to act crazy so that the boss will send me home." She climbs up the racking and hangs from the rafters yelling, "I'm a light bulb. I'm a light bulb. I'm a light bulb." "What are you doing?" "Get down from there and go home," shouts the boss. The second blonde picks up her tool bag and heads towards the door. "Where in the hell do you think you're going?" the boss exclaims. "What?" replied the second blonde. "I can't be expected to work in the dark." So Michael, a handsome man, walked into a sports bar around 9:58 p.m. He sat down next to this blonde at the bar and stared up at the TV as the 10 p.m. news came on. The news crew was covering a story of a man on a ledge of a large building preparing to jump. Michael says, "You know what? I bet he will," the blonde replied. "Well, I bet he won't." Michael placed $30 on the bar and said, "You're on." Just as the blonde placed her money on the bar, the guy did a swan dive off of the building, falling to his death. The blonde was very upset and handed her $30 to Michael, saying, "Fair's fair." "Here's your money," Michael replied. "I can't take your money. I saw this earlier on the 5 o'clock news and knew he would jump." The blonde replies, "I did too, but I didn't think he'd do it again." Michael took the money. So, Carolyn, a rich blonde, buys a new automatic Jaguar sports car. She drives the car perfectly well during the day, but at night, the car just won't move at all. After trying to drive the car at night for a week, but without any luck, she furiously calls the Jaguar dealers, and they send out a technician to her. The technician examines the car and finds nothing wrong with it. So he turns to the blonde and asks, "Miss, are you sure you are using the right gears?" Full of anger, the blonde replies, "How on earth you could ask such a question? I'm not stupid, you know. Course, I am using the right gears. I use D during the day and N at night." So, a blonde, wanting to earn some money, decided to hire herself out as a handyman type and started canvassing a wealthy neighborhood. She went to the front door of the first house and asked the owner if he had any jobs for her to do. "Well, you can paint my porch. How much will you charge?" "How about $50? said the blonde. The man agreed and told her that the paint and ladders that she might need were in the garage. The man's wife, inside the house, heard the conversation and said to her husband, "Does she realize that the porch goes all the way around the house?" The man replied, "She should." She was standing on the porch. A short time later, the blonde came to the door to collect her money. "You're finished already?" he asked. "Yes," the blonde answered, "and I had paint left over, so I gave it 2 coats. Impressed, the man reached into his wallet for the $50. "And by the way," the blonde added, "that's not a Porsche, it's a Ferrari." So there was a blonde who found herself sitting next to a lawyer on an airplane. The lawyer just kept bugging the blonde, wanting her to play a game of intelligence. Finally, the lawyer offered her 10-to-1 odds and said every time the blonde could not answer one of his questions, she owed him $5, but every time he could not answer hers, he'd give her $50. The lawyer figured he could not lose, and the blonde reluctantly accepted. The lawyer first asked, "What is the distance between the Earth and the nearest star?" Without saying a word, the blonde handed him $5. Then the blonde asked, "What goes up a hill with 3 legs and comes back down the hill with 4 legs?" Well, the lawyer looked puzzled. He took several hours, looking up everything he could on his laptop and even placing numerous air-to-ground phone calls trying to find the answer. Finally, angry and frustrated, he gave up and paid the blonde $50. The blonde put the $50 into her purse without comment, but the lawyer insisted, "What is the answer to your question?" Without saying a word, the blonde handed him $5. So, a young blonde woman is distraught because she fears her husband is having an affair, so she goes to a gun shop and buys a handgun. The next day, she comes home to find her husband in bed with a beautiful redhead. She grabs the gun and holds it to her own head. The husband jumps out of bed, begging and pleading with her not to shoot herself. Hysterically, the blonde responds to the husband, Shut up. You're next. So 3 girls all worked in the same office with the same female boss. Each day, they noticed the boss left work early. One day, the girls decided that when the boss left, they would leave right behind her. After all, she never called or came back to work, so how would she know they went home early? The brunette was thrilled to be home early. She did a little gardening, spent playtime with her son, and went to bed early. The redhead was elated to be able to get in a quick workout at the spa before meeting a dinner date. The blonde was happy to get home early and surprise her husband, but when she got to her bedroom, she heard a muffled noise from inside. Slowly and quietly, she cracked open the door and was mortified to see her husband fooling around with her boss. Gently, she closed the door and crept out of her house. The next day, at their coffee break, the brunette and redhead planned to leave early again, and they asked the blonde if she was going to go with them. "No way," the blonde exclaimed. "I almost got caught yesterday." So a blonde had just totaled her car in a horrific accident. Miraculously, she managed to pry herself from the wreckage without a scratch and was applying fresh lipstick when the state trooper arrived. "My God," the trooper gasped. "Your car looks like an accordion that was stomped on by an elephant." "Are you okay, miss?" "Yes, officer, I'm just fine," the blonde chirped. "Well, how in the world did this happen?" the officer asked as he surveyed the wrecked car. "Officer, it was the strangest thing," the blonde began. "I was driving along this road when from out of nowhere, this tree pops up in front of me. So I swerved to the right, and there was another tree. I swerved to the left, and there was another tree. I swerved to the right, and there was another tree. I swerved to the left, and there was—" "Ah, miss," the officer said, cutting her off. "There isn't a tree on this road for 30 miles. That was your air freshener swinging back and forth." So, standing beside a valiant stallion, a beautiful blonde decides she must ride this animal, despite having no previous riding experience. Soon, she finds herself atop the horse's back, galloping through a lush green meadow. Unsuspecting, the horse suddenly picks up speed and she finds herself euphoric over the freedom she is experiencing. Once again, the magnificent animal picks up speed, except this time her inexperience gets the better of her. She finds herself barely able to hang on. The startled horse is now in a dead run, and the beautiful blonde finds herself hanging off to one side of the horse, her head just inches from the ground. Catastrophe, seconds away. She begins to frantically scream for help when all of a sudden, Frank, the Walmart doorman, calmly walks up and unplugs the ride. So a girl came skipping home from school one day. "Mommy, Mommy," she yelled. "We were counting today, and all the other kids could only count to 4, but I counted to 10. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. "Very good," said her mother. "Is it because I'm blonde?" The girl said. "Yes, it's because you're blonde," said the mommy. The next day, the girl came skipping home from school. "Mommy, Mommy," she yelled. "We were saying the alphabet today, and all the other kids could only say it to D, but I said it to G." "Very good," said her mother. "Is it because I'm blonde, Mommy?" "Yes, it's because you're blonde." The next day, the girl came skipping home from school. "Mommy, Mommy," she yelled. "We were in gym class today, and when we showered, all the other girls had flat chests. But I have these," and she lifted her tank top to reveal a pair of 36Cs. "Ah, yes, Very good, said her embarrassed mother. Is it because I'm blonde, Mommy? No, dear. It's because you're 24. So two blondes were driving down the road. The driver noticed that she was low on gas, so she stopped at the gas station. While she was pumping her gas, she noticed that she had locked the keys in the car. When she went inside to pay, the blonde asked the attendant for a coat hanger so she could attempt to open the door herself. She went outside and began to jimmy the lock. 10 minutes later, the attendant went outside to see how the blonde was faring. The blonde outside of the car was moving the hanger around and around. Meanwhile, the blonde inside of the car was saying, a little more to the left, a little more to the right. So a policeman was interrogating three blondes who were training to become detectives. To test their skills in recognizing a suspect, he shows the first blonde a picture for 5 seconds, then hides it. This is your suspect. How would you recognize him? The first blonde answers, that's easy. We'll catch him fast because he only has one eye. The policeman says, well, that's because the picture shows his profile. Slightly flustered by this ridiculous response, he flashes the picture for 5 seconds at the second blonde and asks her, this is your suspect. How would you recognize him? The second blonde giggles, flips her hair and says, ha, he'd be too easy to catch because he only has one ear. The policeman angrily responds, what's the matter with you two? Of course, only one eye and one ear are showing because it's a picture of his profile. Is that the best answer you can come up with? Extremely frustrated by this point, he shows the picture to the third blonde and in a very testy voice asks, this is your suspect. How would you recognize him? He quickly adds, think hard before giving me a stupid answer. The blonde looks at the picture intently for a moment and says, the suspect wears contact lenses. The policeman is surprised and speechless because he really doesn't know himself if the suspect wears contacts or not. Well, that's an interesting answer. Wait here for a few minutes while I check his file, and I'll get back to you on that. He leaves the room and goes to his office, checks the suspect's file in his computer, and comes back with a beaming smile on his face. Wow, I can't believe it. It's true. The suspect does in fact wear contact lenses. Good work. How were you able to make such an astute observation? That's easy, the blonde replied. He can't wear regular glasses because he only has one eye and one ear. So a blonde became terribly overweight, so her doctor put her on a diet. I want you to eat regularly for 2 days, then skip a day and repeat this procedure for 2 weeks. The next time I see you, you'll have lost at least 5 pounds. When the blonde returned, she shocked the doctor by being nearly 20 pounds lighter. Why, that's amazing. The doctor said, did you follow my instructions? The blonde nodded. I'll tell you though, I thought I was going to drop dead that 3rd day. From hunger, you mean? He asked, puzzled. No, from the skipping. So a woman hired a contractor to repaint the interior of her house. The woman walked the man through the 2nd floor of her home and told him what colors she wanted for each room. As they walked through the first room, the woman said, I think I would like this room in a cream color. The contractor wrote on his clipboard, walked to the window, opened it and yelled out, green side up. He then closed the window and continued following the woman to the next room. The woman looked confused but proceeded with her tour. In this room, I was thinking of an off blue. Again, the contractor wrote this down, went to the window, opened it, and yelled out, green side up. This baffled the woman, but she was hesitant to say anything. In the next room, the woman said she would like it painted in a light rose color. And once more, the contractor opened the window and yelled, "Green side up!" Struck with curiosity, the woman mustered up the nerve to ask, "Why do you keep yelling green side up out of my window each time I tell you what color I'd like a room?" The contractor replied, "Because I have a crew of blondes laying turf across the street." So a blonde dials 911 to report that her car has been broken into. She is hysterical as she explains her situation to the dispatcher. They've stolen the dashboard, the steering wheel, the brake pedal, and even the accelerator. She cries. The 911 dispatcher says, "Stay calm. An officer is on the way. He will be there in 2 minutes." Before the police get to the crime scene, however, the 911 dispatcher's telephone rings a second time, and the same blonde is on the line again. "Never mind," giggles the blonde. "I got in the back seat by mistake." So, a blonde goes into a store and sees a shiny object on the shelf. She asks the clerk, "What is that shiny object?" The clerk replies, "That is a thermos." The blonde then asks, "What does it do?" The clerk responds, "It keeps hot things hot, and it keeps cold things cold." The blonde says, "Oh, I could use something like that. I'll take it." The next day, as she walks into work with her new thermos, she spots her boss and shows off her shiny new thermos. "I just got this yesterday. Isn't it wonderful? It's a thermos, and it keeps hot things hot and cold things cold." The boss asks, "So what do you have in it?" The blonde replies, "Some coffee and a popsicle." So there was a blonde who was sick of all the blonde jokes. One day, she decided to get a makeover, so she cut and dyed her hair. She went driving down a country road and came across a herd of sheep. She stopped and called the sheep herder over. "Tell you what, I have a proposition for you," said the woman. "If I can guess the exact number of sheep in your flock, can I take one home?" "Sure," said the sheep herder. So, she sat up and looked at the herd for a second and then replied 382. "Wow," said the herder. "That is exactly right. Go ahead and pick out the sheep you want to take home." So the woman went and picked one out and put it in her car. Then her herder said, "Okay, now I have a proposition for you." "What is it?" queried the woman. "If I can guess the real color of your hair, can I have my dog back?" So a blonde was rollerblading with her headphones on. She stopped at a hair salon and asked for a haircut. She instructed that the hairstylist could not take off her headphones. The stylist refused to cut her hair like that, so she left. She went to a different hair salon and said the same thing. This time, the stylist agreed to cut her hair. After a while, the blonde fell asleep in the chair. To wake her, the stylist took off the headphones. The blonde immediately fell on the floor, flopped for a while, then died. Confused at what happened, the stylist put on the headphones. They were saying, "Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in." So a young ventriloquist is touring Norway and puts on a show in a small fishing town. With his dummy on his knee, he starts going through his usual dumb blonde jokes. Suddenly, a blonde woman in the 4th row stands on her chair and starts shouting, "I've heard enough of your stupid blonde jokes. What makes you think you can stereotype Norwegian blonde women that way? What does the color of a woman's hair have to do with her worth as a human being? It's men like you who keep women like me from being respected at work and in the community, and from reaching our full potential as people. It's people like you that make others think that all blondes are dumb. You and your kind continue to perpetuate discrimination, against not only blondes, but women in general, pathetically all in the name of humor. The embarrassed ventriloquist begins to apologize, but the blonde interrupts, yelling, "You stay out of this. I'm talking to that little bastard on your lap." So a group of guys were chatting with a good-looking blonde and, somewhat improbably, asked her to climb this pole that was conveniently nearby. For whatever reason, she decided to do it. When she told her mother what happened, her mother scolded her. "Don't you understand that they only wanted to see your underwear?" The girl was understandably upset at being very stupid and naive, and decided to show those boys a thing or two. The next day, they repeated their request, and when she came home, she was beaming. "What are you so happy about?" asked her mother. "I totally showed them," replied the blonde. "Today, I didn't even wear underwear."